Hi there and welcome back to the channel. So I thought it was about time I made another lamp base using the rotary axis on my CNC machine. I've been looking at a few ideas, so I want to make something unusual, something that you wouldn't look at in normal life and think lamp base, and I want to exploit the unique properties of the rotary axis on the CNC machine to make something that you can't make on a traditional lathe. I also want to use a material that enhances the shape of whatever I'm making. So I think again I'll use birch ply for this. So I've decided, looking at various options, perfume bottles, glass bottles, I started looking at stills, so whiskey and gin stills. So I think a gin still is something that would make a good lamp base, certainly one that won't topple over based on the shape of them. So I think that's what I've decided I'm going to do. I'm going to publish this video as a step-by-step guide, and that means you'll be able to skip the bits you don't want to see. So let's see how I get on. So the starting point for me is an online search to find something that is a really nice shape and something that I think that I can make on the machine. So the critical factor here is what the size of what you can fit into the rotary axis. So based on some mistakes that I've made earlier, where I've made pieces that are too big, I'm going to stick to a 250mm, so roughly 10-inch diameter for this. So this is quite a short, dumpy kind of shape. I want to hopefully try and go for an 18-inch high, a 450mm high lamp base here. We'll see how we go with the shape. We may need to elongate it a little bit, but the first step for me now, once I've got the image and decided that this is what I want to make, is to trace a vector around the outside of the image. Now Aspire has some tools for tracing around bitmap images, but I'll show you here that there is an option to pick colours, and it's very good, but I don't want to do this. I just want an outline of this image that I'm going to wrap around an axis and produce a rotary job for the CNC machine to cut. So I'm not going to go straight from Aspire to Mach 4 and the machine. What I want to do here is see what the most efficient use of the material is. So I'm going to be using 18mm birch ply for this, and I don't think I need to have pieces that are 18 inches high all the way across here. I think it'd be very wasteful. So I want to try and slice this up, and the best way for me to do it, and I know Aspire can do this, is to use Blender. So we'll jump into Blender in a minute or two once I've got my 3D model made in Aspire. The other thing I want to try and do with this piece is to have 4 faces on it. So you'll see on the oval lamp base video that there are 4 faces, and the way to do that is to have cross pieces. So you're layering up on 4 sides all at the same time, building from the center outwards. So I can't think of any way of doing that in Aspire, so I'm going to use Blender. So this shape, I need to simplify it slightly. I'm not going to have these handles, and I'm going to try and have these straps with the studs. I think that would be kind of cool to show the studs. Possibly do the hammer finish, so I'm going to try and do this. So this will be a copper still, which would be have hammer finish on it just to strengthen it. So I'm going to try and recreate that, and we'll see how that goes. but for now what I'm going to do is trace round this in a spar and wrap a rotary job. So this is a vector I've traced round the bitmap image. Very easy to do with a combination of straight lines, circles which you can cut using node editing and the curve tool. So it's interesting to do this. You also have to bear in mind perspective, because this is not a head-on photograph of the still. So I'm taking a horizontal line from the base here in this corner and extrapolating that across. So this is all I need for a rotary job in a spar to be able to wrap this between the rails on each side. So I'll show you that on the job. What I'm aiming for here, as I said, is a 250mm diameter. So I'm going to try and manipulate this vector so that it's 125mm across as a radius. So I can go into my sizing tool and we can see here that it's 103mm, so I just need to make that 125, and then we'll see where we are height wise. So we're getting close to the 450 that I want, so we'll maybe be able to stretch that a little bit and it'll not take away from the shape. So this is now a vector which I will use for wrapping. So I'll just rotate that around. And then bring that into my job. I'll just for simplicity, it's easier just to have it here below the workpiece. This is my workpiece. And just to show you the job settings, we have a rotary job. We're going for a piece of stock which is 450mm long and this 250mm diameter. My 0 position is the axis for rotary jobs, and my rotary axis is positioned at the back of my machine, so I work from the right hand side to left, and I'm going along the x-axis. So we'll just OK that. So this is my vector, and I'm going to make that 450mm long. So I want to disconnect the XY and just make that 450, because I don't want that 125 to get any bigger. So we've now got our final vector that we're going to use for our rotary job. So all I need to do is select these rails that Aspire creates automatically for you on a rotary job, and go into our sweep tool, use those selected rails, then pick the vector and apply that. So we'll go into 3D view and have a look at this. Okay, that's pretty good. So it's starting to take shape. That's exactly what I want. So what am I going to do next? I'm going to create the studs that go around these straps, and then I'm going to put on some hammer finish. Now I think I'll just concentrate on this area. So I'll do that off camera and then come back when I've done those models. So this is what it looks like now with the studs on the straps and the hammer finish. So I don't think I want to add anything more to this. It's just going to overcomplicate it. Now we have our 3D model ready to export from Aspire, so that we can open it up in Blender and do our slicing. So I'm just going to very quickly do an STL export. And save that. And the next step is we'll open it up in Blender. Okay, so after importing it into Blender, I want to create my slices. So I'll create cubes which are 18 millimeters wide. Now the units in Blender are in meters, and I don't change them because I don't need to, because this allows me to bring this into Blender and back into Aspire again, and it keeps the units in millimeters in Aspire. So I create all these cubes which are layers of plywood and build them out from the center, and then I use a modifier in Blender to convert those cubes into the slices where there's an intersection of the gin still and the sheet. So it probably sounds overcomplicated, but when you do it, it's not. So I'll just go in here and do a boolean and an intersect, and I've gone ahead and done this so just to keep this video as short as possible. So I'm just going to unhide all of these cubes that I've created, and you'll be able to see, hopefully, and maybe if I rotate this a little bit, you'll be able to see all of these slices that have been created. And then ultimately I will hide the gin still. I will ultimately delete it, but now we can see these slices, and I get a face here and a face here. I don't need to go all the way around because I'm just going to duplicate each of these slices when I go back into Aspire. So what I'll do now, in order to get this ready to go back into Aspire, I will line all of these up on the same plane so that they will be on a sheet in Aspire, all in the same plane, which will be a sheet of 18mm ply in Aspire. So we'll show you that next. Here's all my slices. Now what I can do is just take a cutting list from the dimensions of each of these pieces in Blender, take that out to the workshop, go and search for some of the pieces that may be offcuts from other projects, and cut the rest. So I'll always just leave some tolerance just to give me a margin of error on each of these pieces. But you can see that I don't need a whole bunch of 450mm by 250mm pieces, which you would do if you hadn't used Blender, and that would be such a waste. So this gives me the opportunity to use some of the pieces that are offcuts, and it speeds the job up as well, because I don't need to run a rounding path for the whole length of the piece, and I can just go straight in with roughing of the 3D model in Mach 4. So we can stop here and create a cutting list and start laying the pieces out. So the difficulty is making sure that you've got all the pieces in the right order, and you know which piece is for a front and back and which piece is for a side. So I'm going to lay these pieces out. I'll show you them sitting on the table after they've been cut, and then you can see the assembly process, and then it gets a little bit more interesting because you're seeing things work in real life and build up from these pieces. So we're going to leave it there for now. I have brought this into Aspire to give me a cutting list, but you don't really need to. So next step, cutting the pieces out and doing a glue up. Having cut all the pieces out, this is where it can get complicated. I lay them out on the table and keep all of the north-south separate from the east-west facing pieces. Label them all separately, starting with the innermost pieces working outwards. So it turns out that even though I measured all of this out and I know I can fit 250mm into my rotary axis, and I measured everything on Aspire and Blender to fit within 250 mils. The sides are all 250 mils, but obviously, stupid me, the diagonals are going to be more than 250 mils. So to fix this, I'm going to cut two 250 mil circles on the CNC, put one at the bottom, one on the top, and whatever doesn't fit into that cylinder is going to get cut off on the bandsaw. So let's do it. Okay, now just a simple matter of marking the centres and lining up with the centre hole. So let's get started. So as you can see, this should roll if it was 250 mil. So there's quite a bit to come off, even on the sides, on the top. Okay, so job for the bandsaw. That's it, cut on the bandsaw, and just doing a test here just to make sure that it fits and that it rotates freely. So with the machine switched off, I can just rotate this by hand, and it seems to be okay. We're clearing the sides fine. So I'll go ahead and do a quick rounding path on it before I start the rough cut and then the finish. So relieved to have that cut and fitting in now. Will not make that mistake again. Good to have the bandsaw to be able to get that cut down. So let's go. So as you saw there, that toolpath is a little bit aggressive and the bit started to wander. So I'm going to up the RPM and slow the feed rate down and give it another go. Okay, that's the roughing pass done eventually. So we're looking at, if I can focus that, 5 hours on the clock. So it's really good to get that done. So what are we left with? Well, you could say this is the Minecraft version. So it does look a bit blocky at this stage. Now there are a couple of things just to point out here. I put an arrow on the bottom here so that I would know where my A0 was on the rotary axis. So as time progressed with the first few cuts, I noticed that this was going out of step. Now I don't think there's any issue in the machine. I just don't think that's the case. I think it's just because it's birch plywood that it's so hard that it's actually dragging the piece in with the bit, so it's incrementally, and you wouldn't notice it on each pass, incrementally building up a slight discrepancy in the angle. So it meant that whenever I stopped and restarted a couple of times and reset the A to 0, then it was cutting at a slightly different position than it was before, which wouldn't matter for pure cylindrical parts of the lamp base, but for where I'm trying to put details in, there are some issues potentially ahead with the finish pass. So I think these are supposed to all line up with each other, and you can tell because of the lines on the birch that it's not quite lining up. So I think we might have some issues here. Now the other thing is, you'll maybe notice, maybe you won't, but it's very difficult to see, but the step down each time was 3.3 millimeters, but this top layer here is about 5 to 6 millimeters above the next one down, and that's because I put some tolerance into the rounding tool path. I put a 5 millimeter diameter. I set it to 260 or 255 diameter for a 250 mil lamp base, and that was just to give me a bit of leeway. So I have to remove this with the finish pass, which will be the round nose bit. So that could present a challenge for that bit. Again, it could start to drag. So what I might do is just take 2 to 3 millimeters off it first, possibly with a straight cutter. So other than that, and you saw that every so often I had to cut a little bit off here, otherwise the collet would have hit the side. Don't really want that to happen, so that just required a little bit of management. But I was watching this like a hawk for the last hour, just to make sure that this all ran smoothly. That's actually hollow in the middle in there, so I need to put a plug in once this is cut, because the plug is at the end there. But whenever I was cutting these, I left them about 100-120 mil longer than they needed to be, just to give me some room to play with. So there are a couple of gaps in the plywood. Hopefully the finish pass will go low enough that it will hide those. There's one there, just there, so that could be an issue for me, but we'll just have to see. I'm loving the shape already, and you can see the cross hatching there on the grains, so you can just about see that. So that's going to be brilliant whenever it cuts with the finish pass. You just can't believe how much better it will look whenever this becomes rounded. And you can see the offset there because of the dragging issue with the bit. Now the way around that, I think, is just to change the tool path so that we're not going on a raster pattern at 90 degrees to the axis, that we're maybe going with the axis, so that we're giving, I think we're giving the bit too much work to do based on the strength of this material. We were going down 3.3 millimeters in each pass. The spindle speed I increased to 11,000. So I think we've done everything we can to ensure that we've got good cuts on the birch plywood. So it'll be down to the tool path. So the next time I make one of these, I'll change the toolpath. It just doesn't make for such a good video because you don't see it being built up from right to left. But I want to get a good end result at the end of the day. The video has to be secondary. So let's take a break. I'll do a bit change, reset the Z height, and we'll go for the finish pass. So let's just see how this transforms now. I think it's going to be beautiful. Okay, I think it's time for a rethink. The hammer finish isn't working out at all. Because of the dragging, and I'm having to every so often reset the A0 on the rotary axis. The hammer finish isn't producing circles, so there isn't really any point in having what should be a hammer finish on the lamp base that doesn't look like hammer finish. So what I'll do is I'm going to wait for it to finish this high section in the middle here that it's currently cutting out, to bring us back down to what should have been the finished dimensions of the roughing pass. So we'll get that finished and out of the way. I'll go back into Aspire, I'll remove the model for the hammer finish and come out and recut that. So I think based on what's been happening so far this morning, I will do 2 more passes, so one at 1mm above final height and then one final pass at final height. So that should hopefully produce a good end result. I really don't think the lamp base here needs the hammer finish. It's not going to take away anything from it not having it. In fact, I think it just looks confusing whenever you look down the lines of the ply. So let's finish here at this high point and then recut without the hammer finish. So we've gone ahead and cleaned up the bottom edge, just jogging on Mach 4 with the straight cutter in. So I'm going to take it out now. It's been on this machine for far too long, and then I'll cut the top, put the plug in, and then drill through those plugs when that glue's set. While that's happening, I'll sand down the surface just to get it nice and smooth for an oil finish, and then it'll be time to wire it up, and I'll have to make a stand for it as well. So very happy with it. I think it's turned out well, and we'll get going, get it finished, get it off the machine. So now that we're off the machine, what's left to do? Well, I've given it a very quick sand with some 120 grit just to take off some of the machining marks. So the plug's in that's been setting overnight, I'll cut it, drill a 10mm hole top and bottom to bring the cable through. Then I'll fit the bulb holder, and then make a stand. So these stills generally sit on stands, so let's make a stand for this. So it'll set another couple of inches taller and allow the cable to exit the bottom of the lamp base. So let's get going. Okay, that's once over with 120 grit, starting to smooth it out now. So yeah, I'm tired after that. So I'll probably take it to 240 through 180 first, and then see what we're like after that. I wanted to start shining before I put any oil on it, so I've got a wee bit to go yet, but the next time you see it, it'll be ready for the oil finish, and I'll drill the holes. I'll show you that as well. I'll drill the holes and pull the cable through once I've done that. And the stand, as you saw there, is glued up. So yes, we're nearly there now. Nice to get to this stage. So I think it's going to look great. Just need to pick out a bulb for it now. That's just one coat of oil and it looks amazing. You can see how much the oil enhances the detail in the grains. It just brings the piece to life. So it's going to look even better when I get another couple of coats on and give it a polish. I can't wait to get this wired up and get a light bulb in it and get it switched on and working for the first time, I think it's going to be absolutely brilliant. So let's keep working. As we finally reach the end of this video, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something new. I know I did, and hopefully you'd like to see more of these videos. You can do this by leaving a comment below, liking this video, and subscribing to the channel. I'd really appreciate that. So enough of me. How did the lamp turn out?